The salty air of the Caribbean port of Port Royal, Jamaica, was thick with the stench of rum, tar, and desperation. For Captain Silas Stoneheart Vance, a man whose reputation was as hard as his name, it was the smell of home and of a trap. He stood on the deck of his ship, the Sea Serpent, his weathered face a mask of stone as he watched the crowd on the docks. They weren't there for him, not yet. They were there for her. Ilara Thorne, a young woman with a fiery spirit and a haunted past, was being led through the throngs by her father, the powerful and ruthless merchant Lord Reginald Thorne. He was a man who saw his daughter not as a person, but as a commodity. Silas had known Ilara's father for years, a man he despised for his coldness and greed. As a young man, Silas had briefly worked for Thorne, a period that ended with a bitter betrayal that fueled Silas's hatred for the man. Now Thorne was parading his daughter in a public display of humiliation, stripping her of her dignity to secure a new alliance. The public spectacle was designed to shame her into obedience, to break her will, and force her to marry a man she despised. The crowd's murmurs turned to jeers as Thorne roughly tore away Ilara's shawl, exposing her. Ilara, her head held high, refused to break. Her eyes, filled with a defiant fire, met Silas's gaze across the harbour. In that moment, a silent plea passed between them. It was a plea for rescue, for freedom, for a chance at a life of her own. Silas's heart, long thought to be made of stone, ached with a familiar ache he had felt for a long time. He had first met Ilara months ago during a raid on a Spanish galleon, a raid where he was about to steal her inheritance from her. Her father's men were about to betray them all and steal the gold for themselves, but Ilara saved him from an ambush. She was the one who, in a fleeting moment of compassion, had helped him, risking everything for a pirate. He had not forgotten her act of kindness, nor the spark he saw in her eyes. She was a different kind of prey for his ship. Silas knew he had to act. He turned to his first mate, a gruff but loyal man named Finn, and the rest of his crew. "Boys," he said, his voice a low rumble, "it's time to earn our reputation. Prepare to board. We're not just taking gold today, we're taking a lady." The crew, a motley but devoted bunch, grinned. They knew Silas was a man of his word and had earned their loyalty not through fear, but through respect. They had seen his courage in countless battles and trusted his judgment. Silas's past, shrouded in mystery, had always hinted at a life before piracy, a life with some form of higher social status, which made his disdain for men like Thorne even more palpable. As Silas and his crew, a storm of seasoned pirates, stormed the docks, chaos erupted. The crowd scattered, and Thorne's guards, unprepared for the swift and brutal assault, were quickly overwhelmed. Silas, his cutlass glinting in the sun, fought with a controlled ferocity, his eyes never leaving Ilara. He reached her just as Thorne's most brutal guard was about to grab her. With a swift movement, Silas disarmed the guard and pulled Ilara into his arms. "You'll stay with me," he said, his voice a low promise, his gaze intense. "I won't let him do this to you." Tears streamed down Ilara's face, not of sadness, but of relief. She had gambled on a pirate's mercy and won. They fought their way back to the Sea Serpent, leaving a trail of stunned guards and an enraged Lord Thorne in their wake. As the ship pulled away from the harbour, Silas watched Thorne's face, contorted in fury. This was not just a rescue, it was a declaration of war. Life aboard the Sea Serpent was a stark contrast to Ilara's privileged but suffocating existence. The ship, while a vessel of freedom, was also a world of constant motion and danger. The days were long, filled with the endless rocking of the waves, the creaking of the ship's timbers, and the smell of salt and sweat. Ilara, however, adapted with a resilience that surprised even Silas. She was no delicate flower, but a woman of strength and purpose. She spent her days learning the ropes, literally and figuratively. She learned to read the stars, to understand the currents, and to mend sails. She was no pirate, but she was becoming one of them. Silas watched her, his admiration for her growing with each passing day. He saw in her a kindred spirit, a person who had also been trapped by a world that sought to control them. She saw past his reputation as Stoneheart and saw the man who had risked everything to save her. Their shared experiences drew them closer. They spent long nights on deck, talking under the vast, star-strewn sky. Silas told her about his life before piracy, about the betrayal that had hardened his heart, and about his true passion, freedom. He spoke of his desire to live a life on his own terms, unbound by the rules of society. Ilara, in turn, shared the story of her own gilded cage, the endless expectations, and the cruel public display her father had orchestrated. She revealed to Silas that her father had long coveted a hidden treasure, a legendary map leading to the lost city of gold, El Dorado, which her mother had secretly entrusted to her. This treasure was what her father truly desired, and the only thing that could save his collapsing empire. Lord Thorn had not only used his daughter as a tool for a political alliance, but also as bait to lure a famous pirate to him, believing the pirate would lead him to the treasure. He had been tracking the map piece by piece, hoping she would eventually expose its location. The public humiliation was a desperate attempt to break her, but also to make her surrender the map. But Ilara had fooled him. He believed a pirate would be a far more effective tool for the treasure hunt. "He's not just a man of greed," Ilara said, her voice a whisper. "He's a man of ambition. And the only thing more dangerous than a man with greed is a man with a hidden ambition." Her words sent a shiver down Silas's spine. Thorn was not just a merchant. He was a manipulator. He had used his own daughter to get what he wanted. He had used her as a tool. Ilara told him that the pirate hunter who had been tracking him was not a woman, but a ruthless man, Captain Valerius the Viper Reed, a mercenary known for his cunning and a man who had his own history with her father. He was a man with a vendetta against Thorn's father, and now he sought to end his life. He was the one who had been tracking her father's movements, and he was the one who was truly hunting a pirate. The moment she had been exposed, her father was giving away his position to the Viper, and he was coming for his final revenge. This new information shifted everything. The conflict wasn't just about Ilara and Silas. It was about a hidden war between two powerful men, a war that Ilara was now a central part of. The true reason for Ilara's public humiliation was to expose her to the Viper. Ilara's father knew that if the Viper saw her, he would come for her, believing she had the map, and in the chaos he would be able to escape. But what he didn't count on was Silas's intervention. As they sailed, a sudden storm descended upon them, a tempest that mirrored the chaos in their lives. The waves, like angry fists, crashed against the ship, and the wind howled a mournful song. The crew worked together, fighting against the fury of the sea. Silas, his muscles straining against the helm, was a force of nature himself. Ilara, holding fast to the mast, saw him not as a pirate, but as a protector. Amidst the chaos, a rogue wave slammed into the ship, knocking Ilara to the deck. She cried out in pain, her ankle twisted. Silas, seeing her fall, abandoned the helm for a moment and rushed to her side. "Hold on," he said, his voice firm. "We'll get through this." The storm raged, but they held on to each other, a beacon of defiance in the heart of the tempest. As the storm subsided, Silas sat with Ilara, his hand gently touching her injured ankle. "We're in this together," he said, his voice soft but full of conviction. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The calm after the storm was a welcome relief, but it was short-lived. A new ship appeared on the horizon, a black flag with a coiled snake fluttering in the wind. Captain Valerius, the Viper Reed, had found them. He was a man of cold, calculated cruelty, and his ship, the Serpent's Kiss, was as silent and deadly as its captain. He had been hunting Thorn for years, a personal vendetta fueled by a past betrayal. The Viper had an agreement with the French monarchy, serving as a privateer. He had lost his own family, his wife and children, in a raid orchestrated by Thorn's father, and he had vowed revenge. The truth was, the Viper had no interest in the treasure map. He was hunting the person who held the true power of Thorn's family, his daughter. He had no use for gold. He wanted to see Thorn's family line end. He would use Ilara to crush Thorn's spirit, to make him watch his daughter be destroyed, to make him feel the pain that the Viper had endured. He was a man consumed by his own vendetta. The two ships engaged in a fierce battle. Cannons roared, the air filled with the smell of gunpowder, and the decks became a stage for a brutal dance of death. Silas and his crew fought with a desperation born of loyalty. They were fighting not just for their lives, but for Ilara's freedom. Ilara, despite her injured ankle, refused to hide. She helped tend to the wounded, her courage an inspiration to the crew. Silas, his heart a drumbeat in his chest, fought his way to the Viper's ship. He knew this was not just a battle, but a duel between two men, a battle for the soul of a woman and the future of two legacies. He saw the Viper, a man whose eyes were as cold and empty as a winter sky. "You have no honor," Silas said, his voice low and dangerous. "You are just a man consumed by revenge. And you," the Viper sneered, "are just a thief who has stolen what is mine." "She is not a thing to be owned," Silas retorted, his cutlass raised. "She is a person, a free woman." Their duel was a whirlwind of steel and fury. Silas, a master of his craft, fought with a controlled rage. The Viper, fueled by his cold vengeance, was a formidable opponent. The battle raged on, each man pushing the other to their limits. Just as the Viper was about to land a fatal blow, Silas, with a burst of strength, dodged the attack and used the momentum to disarm the Viper. With his cutlass at his enemy's throat, Silas looked into his eyes. He saw not a man, but a broken soul. He saw the reflection of his own past, of a man who had let his heart turn to stone, but now he was different. He was not a man of vengeance. He was a man of justice. "Your revenge ends here," Silas said, his voice calm. "Your pain ends here." He didn't kill him. He had another plan. The Viper's crew, seeing their leader defeated, surrendered. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the sea, Silas and his crew returned to the Sea Serpent. Ilara, her face streaked with tears of relief and exhaustion, embraced him. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We saved us," Silas corrected, his arms wrapped around her. "We're a crew now, a family." Silas, ever the strategist, had a final plan. He had his crew tie up the Viper and his men, and he sailed towards the coast, not to a port, but to a hidden cove. He had no intention of handing the Viper over to the authorities. He had another plan. He sailed to a hidden cove, where he was met by his father and a small group of old friends. It was his family, and he was not the only one. He revealed his true plan. He would hand over the Viper to his father and his allies, who had been waiting for the Viper for years. They were not pirates, but a secret society, a group of powerful men who sought to protect the world from men like the Viper. Silas had not just saved Ilara, he had used her as a way to lure out the Viper and to finally bring him to justice. He had been working with his father and his allies for years, and he had finally completed his mission. He had not only saved Ilara, but he had also brought his family's honor back. He was not just a pirate, he was a hero. Ilara had a moment of shock, but then she realized the truth. He had not been a pirate all along. He had been a man with a hidden mission, and she had been a part of it. He was not a thief, but a man who sought justice. He had not just saved her, he had given her a new life. He had given her a purpose. Ilara and Silas stood on the deck of the Sea Serpent, watching the sun set on a new horizon. They had faced a storm, they had faced a pirate hunter, and they had faced their own pasts. They were no longer two broken souls. They were two people, united by a shared purpose, a shared future. Silas turned to Elara, his eyes filled with a new light, a light that had not been there before. He took her hand, and in that moment, he saw not a woman, but a partner. She was no longer a victim, but a survivor, a warrior, and a woman who had given him a reason to live, a reason to fight. "You'll stay with me," he said, his voice a promise, "not because you have to, but because you want to." Elara smiled, her heart full. "I wouldn't have it any other way," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. The sea serpent sailed into the open sea, leaving the past behind, and sailing towards a future of freedom, of love, and of a life on their own terms.